Why are you doing that back here?
He only needs a few minutes. There isn't another place for me to do it.
You knew this was happening?
We thought he could manage.
Stop the visit. I want this explained.
Mr. Vale doesn't need the full robotics floor today, Meredith Crowe said, angling her tablet across the security desk as if the building itself belonged to her. And the intern can wait downstairs. At 7:42 on a wet Thursday morning, Jalen Brooks stood inside Northlake Adaptive Systems with his badge clipped to the pocket of a pressed blue shirt and his left pant leg tailored cleanly around a carbon fiber prosthetic. His internship contract gave him access to Lab 3 for the quarterly assistive mobility inspection, the same inspection Billionaire CEO Everett Vale had flown in to observe. Meredith had not scanned his badge. She had looked first at the prosthetic, then at the cheap messenger bag on his shoulder, then decided he was in the wrong place. Jalen kept his hand flat on the folder against his chest. Inside were the calibration sheets Dr. Shu had asked him to bring upstairs, including the gate response report he had stayed late to finish after 2 senior engineers left the test rig misaligned. The folder had a coffee ring on one corner from his mother's kitchen table where he had reviewed the numbers while she packed her nursing shoes for a night shift. "I'm assigned to Lab 3, he said. "Doctor, Shu added me to the inspection schedule last week." Meredith smiled without warmth. She was Northlake's Director of Executive Experience, which meant she controlled the route, the photos, the catered breakfast, and, this morning, the version of the company Everett Vale would see. Her white blazer looked expensive enough to make the lobby plants seem underdressed. Behind her, 2 visiting board members murmured near a wall of framed patents while a photographer adjusted his lens. "This is not a school tour," she said. "The executive walkthrough is limited to essential personnel. I'm not on a school tour. No one said you were." She glanced at his badge, then away from it before the scanner could read the chip. "But we have safety protocols around active prototypes. Stairs, wet floors, moving platforms, I'm sure you understand." The guard behind the desk, a broad-shouldered man named Vince, shifted his weight. Jalen had seen him every morning for 6 weeks. Vince knew Jalen took the service elevator because the east stairwell door stuck and because the company had not fixed the elevator call plate on the 3rd floor. Vince's eyes dropped to the folder, then to Meredith's tablet, where the day's visitor route glowed in neat blocks of color. Jalen felt the old heat rise under his collar, not anger exactly, more like being 16 again in a sporting goods store, while a manager asked whether he knew how much the running blades cost. He had lost his lower leg in a bus crash when he was 13. He had gained a habit after that. Before entering any room, he counted exits, chairs, steps, and faces. He wished he did not still count faces. "I signed the lab safety acknowledgement," he said. "My badge opens the lab. My name should be under Dr. Lena Shu." Meredith tapped the tablet with one polished nail. "I have Dr. Shu, Mason Pike, Alan Voss, and 2 demo technicians. I do not have you." Then the schedule didn't sync. "Or," she said, lowering her voice, "someone may have invited you informally without understanding today's sensitivity." A small laugh came from one of the board members, not loud, almost deniable. The kind of laugh that found a place to hide before anyone could point at it. Jalen looked past Meredith toward the glass wall that separated the lobby from the production corridor. Through it, he could see a crate marked Orion K.N.E. waiting beside the freight elevator. A yellow strap crossed the crate twice. It should have had 3 straps if the actuator column inside was still mounted. He noticed the missing strap because he had packed that unit himself on Tuesday and written a note about vibration drift on the blue inspection tag. His report mattered. "I need to deliver these calibration sheets before Mr. Vale sees the Orion demo," he said. Meredith's expression tightened at the name of the product. Northlake's Orion line was the reason Everett Vale had bought controlling interest 3 months earlier. The press called it a moonshot for amputee mobility. Jalen had applied for the internship because the first time he tested an early prototype knee in a university lab, he had walked down a ramp without thinking about every inch of it. "Give the folder to me," Meredith said. "I'll make sure the right people receive it." "No, Mom. Dr. Shu asked me to hand it to her." "Mom?" Her eyebrows lifted. "Jalen, is it?" Let me be very clear. A billionaire CEO is coming through this building with investors, counsel, and media. Today is not the day for an intern to improvise his way into the spotlight. I'm not trying to be in the spotlight. Then this should be easy. Vince cleared his throat. Director Crow, his badge is active for 3. I checked him in yesterday. Meredith turned just enough to make Vince regret speaking. Yesterday was not today. The revolving doors spun behind them, bringing in a gust of damp air and 3 men in dark suits. Everett Vale entered last, taller than Jalen expected, silver hair cut close, no tie. One hand wrapped around a paper cup from a local diner instead of the espresso service Meredith had staged on the marble counter. He paused to shake rain from his coat, while Meredith's whole posture changed. "Mr. Vale," she said, brightening. "Welcome back to Northlake. We're ready to begin with the innovation wall, then move upstairs to the controlled demo." Everett's gaze traveled over the lobby, the patents, the cameras, the board members. Then it landed on Jalen's folder, on the badge Meredith still had not scanned, and finally on the prosthetic leg visible beneath the hem of his trousers. He did not stare long, but he noticed the way engineers noticed uneven sound in a machine. "Is there a holdup?" Everett asked. "Not at all," Meredith said, "just redirecting a non-essential intern away from the active lab route for his own safety." Jalen heard the phrase settle into the lobby like spilled oil. Vince looked down. The photographer lowered his camera. One of the board members checked his phone. Everett took one step closer. "Did we scan his badge?" Meredith gave a small, practiced laugh. "We don't need to delay the visit over a badge. He's not on my executive list." "I didn't ask if he was on your list." For the first time that morning, Meredith hesitated. Jalen could have stayed silent and let the CEO rescue him. He knew how that would look, the disabled black intern being granted permission because a powerful man found him interesting for 10 seconds. He hated the relief that tried to slip into him anyway. He placed the folder on the security desk, turned it so the label faced up and tapped the top page once. "My name is Jalen Brooks," he said. "I'm assigned to Dr. Shu in Lab 3. That folder contains the gate response correction for the Orion demo unit. The crate by the freight elevator is missing a restraint strap, which means either the actuator column was removed after packing or the unit was opened without updating the tag. If Mr. Vale is about to watch a controlled demo, someone needs to verify that before the platform powers on." The lobby did not go silent. It became busier in smaller ways. A suit whispered into a phone. Vince finally reached for the badge scanner. Meredith's tablet chimed with a calendar reminder no one touched. Everett looked toward the crate. Meredith stepped between him and the corridor. "That's an internal handling detail. We can address it after the tour." Jalen saw then that she was not confused. She was protecting the morning she had built. Vince scanned the badge. The desk light flashed green. On the monitor beside Jalen's photo and access level, a red note appeared from Dr. Shu. "Recall for Orion walkthrough. Do not start demo without Brooks' calibration review." Everett read it once. Meredith read it twice. Then she reached for Jalen's folder. Jalen moved his hand over it before she could take it. "Not until Dr. Shu signs the receipt," he said. Shu arrived with a hair clip clenched between her teeth and a diagnostic tablet pressed against her ribs. She was small, brisk, and already irritated in the particular way engineers became irritated when time had been stolen from a machine. "Why is my intern still in the lobby?" she asked. Meredith recovered first. "Lena, we were just clarifying access. There was a mismatch between the executive schedule and the lab subschedule." "There is no mismatch, Doctor." Shu took the hair clip from her mouth, pinned back a loose twist of black hair, and looked at Jalen. "Did anyone open that crate?" "I don't know," Jalen said. "The center strap is gone. The blue tag should say column drift. No live weight load until recalibrated." Everett Vale turned to the freight elevator. "Show me." That was how the tour stopped being a tour. Meredith walked beside Everett down the glass corridor with the tight smile of a woman trying to pull a curtain across a window while everyone watched the street behind it. Jalen followed 2 steps behind Dr. Shu. Vince stayed at the lobby desk, but before the corridor doors shut, he slid a printed badge activity report onto the counter and placed Jalen's folder on top of it, as if making a little island no one could erase. Inside the production wing, the air changed from perfume and wet wool to machine oil, warm plastic, and the faint metallic dust from milled titanium. Jalen knew the sounds here. The soft thump of vacuum fixtures. The click and pause of the laser cutter waiting for its next pattern. The low whine from the endurance rig at the far wall, flexing a test joint thousands of times, while nobody looked impressed enough by the patience of it. The Orion crate sat by the freight doors with 2 yellow straps instead of 3. Dr. Shu crouched and touched the exposed notch where the 3rd strap had been cut, not unclasped. Who moved this? Meredith opened her tablet. Mason's team staged it early for visual readiness. The demo area photographs better if the product is already near the platform. It was not cleared for visual readiness, Dr. Shu said. It was tagged for recalibration. Mason Pike emerged from Lab 3 wearing a North Lake fleece vest and the expression of a man who had practiced being reasonable in mirrors. He was the senior demo engineer, 32, blonde, easy with investors, and harder with interns who corrected load tolerances in front of technicians. Jalen had spent most of the month learning when Mason called an idea interesting, because he meant, "Don't say that again. There's no issue," Mason said. "We swapped in the stable column last night. The crate tag just didn't get updated." Jalen looked at the blue tag hanging from the handle. His handwriting was still there, blocky and slanted left. "Do not. Power under load, Veracide strut alignment." But below it, someone had added a black check mark that did not belong to Dr. Shu, did not belong to Jalen, and did not belong to the technician who normally signed off with initials. Dr. Shu saw it too. "Who initialed clearance?" Mason gave a small laugh. "Lena, we're not doing a courtroom scene next to a crate. I cleared it. We needed the system ready." "You do not have clearance authority on a red-tagged gate assembly. It was functionally cleared." "That is not a category." Everett lifted his cup, then seemed to remember he was holding it and set it on a nearby workbench without drinking. "Mr. Pike, did you update the maintenance log?" Mason's eyes moved toward Meredith, quick enough that Jalen almost missed it. "The log update is pending, but the demo is controlled and Alan can run it without full load." "Alan is not the test subject," Dr. Shu said. That made Everett turn back. "Who is?" No one answered for half a second too long. Jalen felt his left socket tighten against his skin. He had agreed the week before to wear the Orion knee on a flat surface demonstration after calibration, not because he wanted to be photographed, but because Dr. Shu had asked him like a person, not like a prop. She had told him he could refuse any run. She had meant it. Mason had smiled through that conversation as if consent were a delay. Meredith said, "We had planned a simple volunteer walkthrough. Very human. Very clear for investors." Everett's face did not harden, it became less available. "Volunteer." Jalen stepped closer to the crate. "I agreed to test after my correction file was reviewed. Not before." Mason raised both hands slightly. "And no one is forcing anything. But we should be honest about what's happening." Jalen flagged normal prototype noise as a failure risk because he's new to the hardware. "That's fine. Interns learn. We don't have to derail a board inspection over it." There it was. The wrong story, dressed in patience. Meredith added, "The concern from the lobby was about safe routing. We can't ignore that either. We have a duty of care." Jalen almost laughed. Duty of care had not sounded like care when she used it to keep him downstairs. Shu held out her hand. "Jalen, your folder." He gave it to her. She opened to the calibration sheet, but before she could read, Mason touched the edge of the page. "Let's not circulate unreviewed intern notes as if they're official." Jalen pulled the folder back an inch. His voice came out lower than he expected. "They became official when Dr. Shu assigned the review and put me on the access note." Mason's mouth tightened. "You don't get to define official." "No," Jalen said. "The workflow does." A technician near the endurance rig stopped pretending not to listen. Her name was Priya, and Jalen had seen her photograph every test plate before it moved stations. She reached for the tablet clipped to her belt, then hesitated when Meredith looked at her. Everett noticed the hesitation. "Do you have something relevant?" Priya swallowed. "I photographed the crate at 6:10 p.m. yesterday before I left. 3 straps, still active. I can send it to Dr. Shoo. Meredith's tablet chimed again, sharper this time. Let's be careful about informal media. It's not media, Priya said. It's station documentation. Everett nodded once. Send it. Mason's pleasant expression thinned. This is becoming disproportionate. Dr. Shoo read Jalen's top sheet, then the second. The lines beside her mouth deepened. No live demo. Meredith took a step forward. Lena, the CEO is here. The board is here. We have press waiting in the atrium. And you have a prosthetic knee assembly with an unverified column, an altered tag, and a proposed user who did not consent to an uncalibrated run. For the first time, Everett looked directly at Meredith instead of through the schedule she had built. Cancel the demo, he said. Meredith did not move. Everett's voice stayed even. Now, across the lab, Mason reached for the demo platform console. Jalen saw his hand before anyone else did. Don't power it on, Jalen said. Mason pressed the wake switch anyway. The platform lights blinked awake under the Orion rig, and the red-tagged knee gave one small, wrong twitch inside the open crate. The twitch was small enough that someone who wanted to ignore it could have called it nothing. Jalen could not ignore it. The Orion knee snapped once against its shipping brace with a dry clack that traveled through the lab benches and into the bones of his left thigh. The motion was not violent. It was worse than violent. It was precise in the wrong direction, a quick inward rotation where the alignment should have held neutral. On a crate, it was a sound. On a person, it would have been a fall. Dr. Chu crossed the floor faster than anyone expected and slapped the emergency stop on the platform console. The indicator lights died. The endurance rig kept flexing in the back of the room, counting its own cycles as if the rest of them had not just stepped to the edge of something ugly. Mason, she said, move away from the console. I was waking the system to show there's no load, Mason said. You powered a red-tagged assembly after the CEO told you the demo was canceled. I powered the platform, not the assembly. That twitch came through the coupling. Mason looked at Everett. With respect, this is exactly what happens when a room lets panic overtake engineering. Prototype joints settle when the system wakes. Jalen heard one noise and turned it into a safety crisis. Jalen felt every face swing toward him, not all hostile, but measuring. He hated that part most, the way his body became part of the evidence and part of the argument at the same time. He stepped to the crate and pointed to the exposed collar beneath the foam spacer. That's not settling. The lateral strut is half a degree off, maybe more. You can see the edge wear on the inside bushing. Mason gave an indulgent sigh. You cannot eyeball half a degree. No, but I can feel what half a degree does after 4 hours. Jalen stopped himself before the sentence turned sharp. He looked at Dr. Shoo instead. My correction sheet has the test run drift from Tuesday. Same direction, smaller amplitude. Priya had her tablet open now. I sent the photo. 3 straps, red tag. Time stamped. Meredith folded her arms. A photograph of a crate does not prove sabotage, negligence, or whatever accusation is being implied. No one said sabotage, Everett said. Meredith's mouth closed. Jalen noticed the word had come from her first. So did Dr. Shoo. So did Priya, whose thumb froze above her tablet. Everett turned to the company counsel beside him, a narrow man who had been silent since the lobby. Preserve access logs for Lab 3, the freight elevator, the demo platform, and the crate staging area from yesterday at 5 p.m. through now. Also preserve the maintenance log, tag history, and platform wake sequence. Counsel nodded and stepped aside with his phone. Mason's face lost its easy color. That's excessive. It's preservation, Everett said, not a conclusion. Meredith moved quickly then, not toward the console, but toward the blue tag still hanging from the crate. We should secure the physical tag so it doesn't get contaminated. Doctor. Shoo's hand shot out. Don't touch it. Meredith stopped an inch from the tag. The lab seemed to notice her hand before she did. The photographer in the doorway lifted his camera, then lowered it when counsel looked at him. 2 technicians stared at their benches. One of the board members whispered, "Is this being documented?" And nobody answered. Jalen understood suddenly that the morning was no longer about whether he belonged in the lab. It was about who got to write down what had happened after deciding he did not. Doctor. Shoo took a clean evidence sleeve from a drawer labeled Test Articles and handed it to Priya. Photograph the tag in place, both sides, no contact. Then bag it with witness initials. Priya nodded, shoulders tight. I can do that. Meredith gave a short laugh. Lena, you're treating a scheduling issue like a criminal investigation. I'm treating a safety issue like a safety issue. And I'm treating a board visit like a board visit, Meredith said. Her voice sharpened before she caught it. We have investors who need confidence. We have a product line that cannot survive rumors that an intern found a defect 5 minutes before the CEO walked in. The sentence hung there, too honest to be recalled. Everett looked at Jalen. Not with pity, not with surprise, with something heavier, an acknowledgement that a fact could be inconvenient and still be a fact. Mr. Brooks, he said, were you asked to participate in the live demonstration today? Jalen's throat tightened. Yes. By whom? Mason asked first. Dr. Hashu later confirmed I could decline any run. Mason shook his head. I asked because he's familiar with the user experience. It was an opportunity. Jalen thought of his mother's kitchen table, her hand resting near his folder but not touching it, as if she knew he needed one thing in the world that nobody else arranged for him. He thought of how proud she had been and how tired. He had wanted to tell her the visit might help him get a full-time offer. He had not told her he was afraid of being used as the company's photograph of inclusion. It was an opportunity if the device was safe, Jalen said. Without calibration, it was my leg on your timeline. Dr. Shu looked away for half a breath. Everett gave counsel another instruction. Add consent records for all demo participants. Meredith's face went still. Mr. Vale, may I speak with you privately before this becomes damaging? No, Everett said. The damaging part already happened in public. Mason turned toward the console again, not touching it this time. Then let's run the diagnostic without load. That will settle it. Jalen looked at the platform screen. A maintenance prompt blinked in the corner, half hidden behind the startup menu. He leaned closer. The prompt showed a pending override entered at 6:31 that morning under a supervisor credential. Mason saw him reading it. Before Jalen could speak, the screen refreshed and the prompt disappeared. Priya's tablet chimed. I got a screenshot, she said, her voice shaking. Mason stared at her, and for the first time he did not look reasonable at all. Priya did not move after she said it. Her thumb hovered over the tablet screen, and the red reflection from the disabled platform made her safety glasses look briefly lit from inside. Mason took one step toward her. Priya, don't make this worse by misreading a service screen. She pulled the tablet closer to her chest. I know what I captured. You captured a temporary prompt. It had a supervisor credential on it. Meredith cut in before Everett could speak. All of you need to stop creating fragments without context. This is exactly how a harmless technical matter becomes a reputational crisis. Jalen almost answered, but Dr. Shu did first. A harmless technical matter does not need an override at 6:31 in the morning. Mason looked at Everett again, trying to find the executive room inside the lab, the place where someone with money would prefer tidiness over truth. We use overrides during staging. It's normal. The credential could be mine, Alan's, anyone's. Then you won't mind counsel verifying it, Everett said. Mason's eyes flicked toward the side door that led to the service corridor. Jalen saw the movement because he had spent half his life watching people look for exits after deciding he was the obstacle. He shifted his weight without thinking, his prosthetic foot finding the grip strip along the floor. Meredith saw him move. Jalen, please don't block staff movement. I'm not. You are standing in an active work zone, so is everyone else. That tone is unnecessary. Jalen felt the words try to hook him. Tone, cooperation, safety. The same ladder, different rungs. He made himself breathe through his nose and looked at Everett instead of her. Can I say what the screenshot means? He asked. Everett nodded. Say it. Mason laughed once, brittle and short. He's an intern. He is the person who saw it, Everett said. Jalen pointed to the platform screen without touching it. The prompt was a calibration override. It lets the platform skip the preload check if a supervisor confirms a non-standard test condition. That doesn't prove who entered it or why. But if red tag was still active yesterday evening and a supervisor override went in this morning before the visit, Then someone tried to make the unit demo ready without clearing the underlying drift. Dr. Shu added, and if a human user had worn it, the risk would not be theoretical. The word human landed harder than Jalen expected. Not because Dr. Shu had meant anything by it, but because he had been treated all morning like a routing problem, a body to move around the schedule. Human sounded almost too plain. Priya swallowed. There's more. The screenshot shows the credential prefix, MP Sup. Mason's face tightened before he could stop it. Meredith turned on Priya. You are a technician, not compliance. No, Priya said, voice quieter now but steadier. I'm the person who has to clean up the test bay when something fails. That stopped the room longer than any speech could have. Everett looked toward Counsel, who had returned with his phone still at his ear. Can it freeze that credential? Already requested, Counsel said. They can suspend platform access pending review. Do it. Mason's mask cracked. You're suspending me because an intern and a technician panicked over a startup artifact? No, Everett said. We're suspending your platform access because you powered equipment after a direct cancellation, you appear connected to an override, and the physical tag may have been altered. Your employment status is not being decided in this room. Meredith seized the distinction. Exactly. So perhaps we should continue the visit while the appropriate teams review this separately. Everett looked at her for a long moment. The visit is now this. Outside the lab glass, a cluster of employees had gathered in the corridor. Some pretended to be waiting for the printer. Others did not pretend at all. Jalen recognized a machinist who had helped him adjust a socket edge his second week, a receptionist from the south entrance, and Alan Voss, the demo technician Meredith had named earlier. Alan's face looked gray. Dr. Shu noticed Alan too. Alan, were you scheduled to run the Orion platform? Alan stepped inside slowly. He was older than Mason, with a stoop from years over benches and a wedding ring he twisted when managers spoke. Yes. Did you enter an override? No. His eyes moved to Mason, then away. I was asked to sign off after staging, but I didn't. Mason snapped, Alan. Alan flinched, and that small flinch told Jalen more than the refusal. Everett's voice softened by 1 degree. Why didn't you sign off? Alan rubbed his thumb over his ring. Because Jalen's drift note was right. I saw the Tuesday run. The knee pulled inward on the ramp. Mason said the CEO visit couldn't be delayed over an intern's comfort level. My comfort level, Jalen said before he could catch himself. Alan looked at him then, ashamed. That's what he called it. I should have corrected him. The anger Jalen had held down all morning finally moved somewhere else, below speech, into the place where disappointment sat heavier than rage. Alan had known. Not enough to fix it, but enough to know. Meredith closed her tablet. This is no longer a productive environment. Dr. Shu gave a tired laugh with no humor in it. It became productive the moment people stopped lying. Everett picked up Jalen's folder from the workbench and handed it back to him. Mr. Brooks, keep this with you. Counsel will make a copy with Dr. Shu present, not before. Jalen took it. The paper felt damp at the corner where his palm had been sweating. Then the corridor doors opened and Vince appeared from security with the printed badge report under his arm. I think you need this, he said, because at 6:28 this morning, Director Crow's escort badge opened Lab 3. Meredith's tablet slipped just enough in her hand for the screen to tap against her ring. Meredith steadied the tablet against her blazer as if the slip had been a matter of grip, not guilt. That is not what it means, she said. Vince held the report with both hands, suddenly aware that he was a security guard standing in front of a billionaire council, directors, engineers, and half the corridor. His voice stayed careful. It means the escort badge assigned to Director Crow opened Lab 3 at 6:28 a.m. I'm not saying who physically used it. Because you can't, Meredith said. Escort badges are used by staff for staging, catering, media setup, facilities. Dr. Shu took one step closer. Catering does not enter Lab 3. They were setting up breakfast near the innovation wall. That's the second floor. Meredith looked to Everett, trying again for the version of the morning where adults handled mess out of sight. Mr. Vale, I understand the optics, but we should not let a badge report, a nervous technician, and an intern's interpretation create a public accusation against senior staff. Jalen heard his title again. Intern, a small word that could be true and still used as a door. Everett did not answer her immediately. He took the badge report from Vince and gave it to Counsel. Does Lab 3 have camera coverage? Entry only, Counsel said. Interior video is restricted because of prototype confidentiality. We can preserve the corridor feed and access data. Do that. Mason folded his arms. You're going to review a hallway camera and find people walking through a hallway. Maybe, Everett said. But we are done relying on confidence as documentation. The sentence moved through the lab with a strange force. Not dramatic, not loud, just useful. Jalen felt Dr. Shu's shoulder lower beside him, the smallest release of tension from a person who had spent years asking for documentation before disaster and being treated like documentation was an attitude problem. Meredith's phone vibrated. She glanced at it, and for a second her face showed something bare, fear. Then she turned the screen down. Priya saw it. So did Jalen. Who texted you? Dr. Shu asked. Meredith gave her a look sharp enough to cut cable insulation. That is not your concern. It is if it concerns the crate. It doesn't. Everett looked at Counsel. Counsel nodded once, not because he could seize a phone, but because he understood a preservation issue when it walked into the room and rang. Meredith said, I have never altered a technical tag in my life. Jalen believed that. Her hands had probably not cut the strap. Her initials were not on the override. But he also remembered the way she had tried to take his folder in the lobby, the way she had named his body a safety problem, while ignoring the safety problem in the crate. No one needs you to be the engineer, Jalen said. Every head turned. He wished for 1 second that he had kept quiet. Then he looked at Alan, still twisting his ring, and Priya with her tablet pinned to her chest, and Vince standing in the doorway because a printout felt like all the courage he had available. You just needed the lab to look finished, Jalen said. You needed the demo to happen. If the red tag stayed visible, Mr. Vale would ask why the product line wasn't ready. So somebody made the warning look like a note that had already been handled. Mason scoffed. That's a story. It is, Jalen said. That's what you were counting on. Mine sounding like a story and yours sounding like operations, Doctor. Shh's eyes stayed on the crate. We can test the tag ink and pull the maintenance system history. We can also inspect the brace cut. If facilities used a blade, it will show one pattern. If the restraint was removed under load, it will show another. Mason laughed again, but the laugh had nowhere to go. This is absurd. No, Alan said. It came out so quietly that at first Jalen thought the endurance rig had changed rhythm. Alan cleared his throat. No, it's not absurd. Mason turned on him. Careful. Alan stopped twisting his ring. I was careful at 6:20. I was careful when I told you not to wake the platform. I was careful when I stood in the corridor and let Jalen get treated like he was trying to sneak into a room where his own work was sitting on a bench. The corridor beyond the glass went still enough that Jalen could hear the rain hitting the high windows. Alan looked at Everett. Mason asked me to use my credential because his supervisor access had a pending compliance warning from last month. I refused. He said Meredith had cleared the optics and that the CEO visit mattered more than one cautious intern. I didn't enter the override, but I didn't report the request either. Mason's face changed in a way Jalen had never seen. Not remorse. Calculation without the smile. You're protecting yourself, Mason said. I am telling the part I know. Meredith's phone vibrated again. This time, a message preview lit the screen before she could hide it. Jalen was close enough to read only 3 words. Do not mention. Dr. Hoosh read them too. Everett's counsel stepped forward. Director Crow, please stop using that device for company-related communications until legal hold instructions are issued. Meredith's cheeks flushed. You cannot be serious. I am. Everett turned to the board members, who had been shrinking into their suits since the platform woke. The inspection is suspended. Lab 3 is under preservation hold. Mason Pike is removed from demo duties pending review. Meredith Crow is removed from control of the visit and all communications related to Orion pending review. Meredith stared at him. You're doing this in front of everyone? Everett looked through the glass at the employees gathered outside, then back at Jalen's folder, now bent at one corner from being held too tightly. It started in front of everyone, he said. The correction can start there too. Jalen did not feel victorious. He felt tired in a way that made the socket edge along his thigh burn. Dr. Shu noticed and lowered her voice. Sit down for a minute. I'm fine. You're limping. He hated that she was right. He hated that his first instinct was to deny a body that had carried him through every minute of the morning. He sat on the nearest stool and adjusted the cuff beneath his pant leg with his back half turned from the crowd. Priya came over and placed her tablet on the bench beside him. The screenshot backed up to station storage, she said. 2 copies. Jalen nodded. Good. I should've spoken earlier. Yeah, he said, then softened it because the truth did not need to be sharpened every time. But you spoke. Across the lab, counsel sealed the blue tag. Vince handed over the badge report. Alan gave a written statement with hands that shook. Mason stood apart, no longer touching any console, while Meredith watched the visit she had designed become an audit she could not stage manage. Everett approached Jalen. Not too close. Mr. Brooks, he said, I owe you an apology for what happened in my company this morning. But I'm not going to make you stand here and accept one before we fix what made it possible. Jalen looked at the crate, the cut strap, the sealed tag and the knee that had twitched before it hurt someone. Then start with the demo consent records, he said. Not with me. Everett nodded. For the first time all morning, the room moved because Jalen had named the next step. The demo consent records lived in a locked cabinet that nobody had expected to open during a board visit. Alan knew the key code. He said so with his eyes on the floor, then corrected himself and looked at Dr. Shu because the correction mattered. I have access because I prep the participant files. Meredith stood near the corridor, under counsel's instruction not to touch her phone, arms folded so tightly her blazer pulled at the seams. Mason had been escorted to a small conference room with glass walls and no equipment. He could still see the lab. Jalen wondered if that was intentional. Everett stayed at the edge of Lab 3, far enough back that the engineers could work without feeling watched like specimens. The board members had lost their appetite for photographs. The press waiting in the atrium had been told only that the tour had shifted to a safety review. It was the first honest sentence the company had produced all morning, even if it was incomplete. Alan opened the cabinet and removed a thin binder labeled Demo Participants, Q3. His hands were steadier now, maybe because the truth had weight but also shape. He placed the binder on the bench between Dr. Shu and counsel. Jalen remained on the stool. He had loosened the socket cuff under his pant leg and hated how grateful his skin felt for the air. Pain made him less patient, and he did not trust himself when Pain started editing other people into enemies. He watched the binder instead. Dr. Shu turned pages. Everett, you should see this. He came over. The first 2 consent forms were clean. Alan's name, a staff demonstrator, flat platform visual walkthrough only. Priya's name, bench side handling only, no wearable trial. The 3rd page had Jalen's name typed beneath participant walkthrough. Jalen leaned forward. His signature sat at the bottom. For a moment, the lab narrowed to that one dark line. That's mine, he said, and felt every person take that sentence the wrong way. Meredith seized it from across the room. Then there was consent, Dr. Shu did not look up. Be quiet. Jalen took the page carefully. The paper was warm from the binder, ordinary office paper, not the electronic consent tablet he remembered. He had signed a form on Monday for observational fitting and supervised comfort assessment after calibration. He remembered because Dr. Hashu had crossed out the phrase promotional recording with a black pen before he signed. This version still included promotional recording. It also included live platform demonstration at executive inspection. His stomach turned, not from fear exactly, but from the ugly intimacy of it. Someone had not merely dismissed him. Someone had copied his name into a different version of his yes. This isn't the form I signed, he said. Counsel's pen stopped. How do you know? Because Dr. Shu crossed out promotional recording. I asked her to. My mother works nights. I didn't want her seeing me in some polished company clip before I told her what the test actually was, Dr. Shu closed her eyes for half a second. I remember. I initialed the deletion. Counsel turned to Alan. Where are original consent files stored? Paper binder and scan archive, Alan said. The scan uploads through the compliance station. Priya spoke from the station near the wall. The archive has a version history. Meredith shook her head. This is drifting far beyond the incident. Document cleanup happens before executive visits. Standardization, formatting, missing initials. It does not mean fraud. Jalen looked at her then. Don't call my consent cleanup. The sentence came out quiet, but it carried across the lab. Even Everett's expression changed. Dr. Shu moved to the compliance station with Priya. The two of them stood shoulder to shoulder, one navigating, one reading aloud enough for counsel to record. The archive showed Monday's original scan at 4:18 p.m., uploaded under Alan's technician account. A second upload appeared at 6:34 that morning, 2 minutes after the platform override, under a shared executive prep credential tied to Meredith's team. Mason's face behind the glass conference wall went flat. Counsel asked, "Can we retrieve the Monday scan?" Priya clicked twice. Yes, the original appeared on screen. There was Jalen's signature. There was Dr. Shu's black line through promotional recording. There were her initials. There was a handwritten note above the participant roll. Fit check only until calibration sign off. Jalen exhaled before he meant to. It sounded almost like a laugh, but there was nothing funny in it. His body had been telling the truth. His memory had been telling the truth. For one bitter second, he hated how much proof it still took. Everett read the screen, then turned to counsel. Who had authority to replace a participant consent file? No one should replace it, counsel said. They can add an updated consent if the participant signs again. I didn't, Jalen said. We know, Dr. Who said. Those two words hit him harder than the apology. Not because they fixed anything, but because nobody had added a condition to them. Alan gripped the edge of the bench. I printed the original Monday. I put it in the binder. Counsel asked, Did anyone ask you to swap it? Alan looked through the glass at Mason, then toward Meredith. Mason told me the form needed to match the visit packet. I said Jalen hadn't signed that. He told me executive prep would handle it. Meredith's voice came thin. That is not an instruction to forge a document. No, Everett said, but it is an instruction to stop pretending this is optics. The legal hold expanded before lunch. Consent records, platform credentials, badge access, crate photographs, tags, email threads, shared drive edits, and executive prep messages were frozen. Mason was sent home pending formal investigation. Meredith was placed on administrative leave from all Orion communications and facility access. Not fired, not ruined in a satisfying sentence, removed from power while the documents were secured. That distinction mattered, and Jalen noticed Everett making it even as part of him wanted swifter punishment. At 11:16, Everett asked the board to join him in the atrium, not for the staged innovation wall but for a public correction to employees. Jalen stayed in Lab 3 at first. He did not want to become the image Meredith had planned from another angle. Then Dr. Shu set a hand on the bench beside him, not touching him. You don't have to speak. I know. But consent records are going to be the first repair. Jalen looked at the original form still glowing on the screen, his signature surrounded by the marks that had kept it honest. Then I'll stand there, he said. Not for the photo. He tightened the cuff, stood slowly, and let the ache be visible as he walked toward the atrium. The atrium had been arranged to sell a future. 3 white display pedestals stood beneath the suspended Northlake logo, each holding a polished piece of assistive hardware under museum lighting. A looped video on the far wall showed athletes, parents, veterans, and office workers moving through bright spaces with Northlake devices. Every frame clean enough to make effort look decorative. The catered breakfast had gone untouched. Coffee cooled in silver urns, mini quitches sweated under glass. Employees lined the balcony and the edges of the floor below, no longer pretending the printer or the elevator had brought them there. Jalen stood beside Dr. Shu near the 3rd pedestal, not behind Everett and not in front of him. He chose that place on purpose, close enough to be seen, not placed. Everett waited until counsel finished speaking with the press liaison, then stepped forward without a microphone. His voice carried because people wanted it to. "The planned Orion demonstration will not happen today," he said. "It was canceled because safety documentation, participant consent, and equipment status could not be verified to the standard this company owes every user." A murmur moved across the atrium. Meredith would have hated the sentence. It had no shine on it. Everett continued. "This morning, an intern assigned to the Orion lab raised a technical concern that should have been checked immediately. Instead, his access was questioned, his role was minimized, and his consent record appears to have been replaced after he signed a different form. The investigation is active, so I will not name conclusions we have not finished proving. But I will name the failure we have already seen. The first system that malfunctioned today was not the knee." Jalen looked at the floor. He did not want a memorable line made from his morning. Still, the employees understood. A low, unsettled sound passed through them, less applause than recognition. Everett turned slightly toward him. "Mr. Brooks, you are not required to speak. You have already done work this company should have respected." Jalen felt every camera in the atrium lift toward the space between them. Counsel raised one hand to the press liaison, and the outside photographer lowered his equipment. Employees kept their phones down, mostly. Priya stood near the staircase, holding her station tablet with both hands. Alan stood halfway behind a column, as if shame had made him choose architecture. Jalen had imagined moments like this when he was younger, before he knew how tiring it was to be publicly vindicated. In those daydreams, the truth came out, and the right words arrived with it. In real life, his socket edge rubbed raw, his mouth was dry, and part of him wanted to call his mother before a stranger's summary reached her first. He stepped forward anyway. "I signed up for the internship because I believed in the Orion line," he said. "Not because it photographs well. Because a knee that responds right can change how a person crosses a street, takes a bus, carries groceries, or stops thinking about the ramp before they reach it." The atrium stayed with him. That helped. This morning wasn't just somebody being rude in a lobby. My access note was ignored. A red tag was treated like an inconvenience. A consent form with my signature was replaced by a different permission I did not give. Those are separate choices. They added up. He stopped. His voice had begun to shake, and he hated that, then decided to let it shake. "I don't want to be the company's inspirational intern. I don't want to be the reason everyone suddenly remembers users are people after the board arrives. I want consent records that can't be swapped during executive prep. I want red tags that stop a demo even when investors are waiting. I want interns and technicians to have a way to report pressure without betting their jobs on whether anyone powerful happens to be in the building." Dr. Shu looked at him then, not proud in the simple way people looked in videos, but stricken, as if he had said aloud what she had normalized by surviving it. Everett nodded once to Counsel, who wrote quickly. From the balcony, a machinist called, "What happens to the files?" Counsel looked ready to answer in legal language, but Everett lifted a hand. "They are under legal hold. We will use an outside reviewer for consent and safety documentation on Orion. No one on the executive experience team will control those records. Lab red tags will require engineering clearance to change, and any override of a safety prompt will generate notice to compliance and the lead engineer." Priya raised her hand before courage could leave her. "What about technicians who refused unsafe requests before today?" Everett turned to her. "They will be interviewed with anti-retaliation protection." Alan's head dropped. Jalen saw it and surprised himself by speaking again. "Protection has to include people who were late telling the truth, or nobody tells the part that embarrasses them." Alan looked up, eyes wet, mouth slightly open. Everett absorbed that. Agreed. Cooperation will matter. So will the difference between pressure, silence, and active falsification. That was not the thunderclap some people wanted. It was better. It was a line a real investigation could stand on. Near the south entrance, Meredith appeared between two glass panels with Counsel from HR beside her. She had no tablet now. Without it, she looked less powerful and more furious. Her gaze found Jalen for one clean second, and in it he saw not apology, not even fear, but resentment that he had made the invisible machinery visible. She turned away before anyone could accuse her of staring. Everett saw that too. "The review begins now," he said. "The product does not move forward until the process can carry the weight." This time, there was applause. Uneven, uncertain, but real. Jalen did not join it. He stepped back as doctor. Shu moved closer and spoke low enough that only he could hear. "You changed the visit." "No," he said, watching Priya hand over her tablet. Vince bring another report. Alan walked toward counsels instead of the column. The visit finally changed direction. Behind them, the Orion display video kept playing, showing a man in sunlight stepping off a curb with impossible ease. Jalen looked at the looping image and waited for someone to turn it off. The Orion video did not turn off right away. It kept looping through its beautiful lie for another 9 seconds while employees shifted under the atrium lights and Everett's correction settled into a shape nobody could decorate. A woman in the clip laughed while stepping over a puddle. A veteran lifted his grandson. A college student crossed a campus lawn without glancing down. Then Priya reached the media console, found the right input, and made the wall go black. No one applauded that part. They simply breathed differently. By noon, Northlake looked less like a company hosting a billionaire and more like a building remembering how many locked cabinets it had. Council set up interview rooms along the second-floor conference wing. IT froze Mason's supervisor credential and pulled the platform wake history. Security exported footage from the Lab 3 corridor, the freight elevator, and the South Service entrance. HR posted an anti-retaliation notice that employees read with the wary attention people gave to signs after a fire drill that turned out not to be a drill. Jalen spent 20 minutes in a wellness room with frosted glass, a vinyl chair, and a bowl of peppermints nobody had opened. He called his mother on the second try. "Jay?" she answered, voice thick from sleep. "You okay?" He had planned to sound steady. He failed on the first syllable. "I'm okay," he said, but something happened at the company. There was a small rustle, then the fuller silence of a nurse waking completely. "Are you hurt?" "No. Not like that. Don't make me guess." So he told her enough. Not every technical detail, not the whole bad theater of the lobby, but the part that mattered, the altered consent, the unsafe demo, the way his name had been moved onto a permission he had never given. He heard her breathing change. "I should come down there," she said. "Ma, no. Don't tell me no in that tone." Despite everything, he almost smiled. "I'm serious. I need to finish the statement, Doctor. Shu's here. Counsel's here. Counsel works for the company. I know. You call me when you leave the building. I will. And Jalen? Yes, Mom. You were right before they proved you were right." He closed his eyes. For a few seconds, the wellness room, the lab, the atrium, and the black screen all moved farther away. "I needed to hear that." "I know," she said. "That's why I said it." When he returned to Lab 3, the first temporary decision had already been made. Orion development would pause for 72 hours, not the whole product line, not a dramatic shutdown for cameras, but enough to quarantine the affected assemblies, audit consent files, and review every safety override from the previous 6 months. Dr. Shu would lead the technical hold with an outside biomedical safety reviewer. Executive experienced staff would lose all access to lab scheduling, participant records, and product status tags. Mason was formally suspended pending investigation. Meredith was placed on administrative leave with building access revoked except through HR. Alan was not cleared. He was placed under protected cooperation, which sounded bureaucratic until Jalen understood what it meant. He had consequences ahead, but Mason could not punish him for telling the truth. Everett asked Jalen to join the first remedial meeting in Lab 3. Jalen said no. The answer surprised the room more than anything he had said in the atrium. "I'll give my statement," Jalen said. "I'll answer technical questions about my correction sheet. But I'm not sitting in a room where my altered consent becomes a bullet point while everyone decides how to repair trust around me." Dr. Hashu looked at him, then down at her own notes. "That's fair." Everett accepted it without trying to look generous. "What do you want instead?" Jalen hated that the question made him tired. Want had become a complicated word. He wanted his leg not to ache. He wanted his mother to go back to sleep. He wanted the internship he had earned before the company made him defend his right to stand beside his own work. I want the original consent scan attached to the investigation record, he said. I want my Monday form treated as the only valid permission I gave. I want a written confirmation that I'm not required to participate in any demo, press, internal video, or investor presentation to keep this internship. Counsel wrote all of it. And, Jalen added, looking at the crate, I want the Orion knee inspected without my body being part of the test. Dr. Shu nodded first. Done. Everett nodded after her. Done. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like a door being unlocked after someone had already searched the room. Jalen could leave now, but he would still have to remember how the lock sounded. By late afternoon, a replacement actuator column was mounted to the bench rig, not a person. Priya ran the first diagnostic under Dr. Shu's supervision. The numbers appeared in plain rows on the monitor. Drift confirmed, inward rotation outside tolerance, unsafe for live demonstration. Jalen did not need to speak. His correction sheet lay beside the keyboard, copied, stamped, and signed into the record. Alan stood across the room waiting for his interview. When Jalen passed, he said, I'm sorry. Jalen stopped. He had imagined a sharper answer all morning. I know, he said. Alan swallowed. Is that enough? No. The older man nodded as if he deserved that. But it's a start, Jalen said and kept walking. At 5:03, Dr. Shu handed him a printed notice confirming his internship status, his right to decline any user testing, and the preservation of his work credit on the Orion correction report. The paper was not poetic. That made him trust it more. He folded it once and slid it into the same folder Meredith had tried to take from him. Outside the lab, the atrium wall remained black. By Monday morning, Northlake had learned how to speak in measures instead of moods. A temporary red tag board went up outside Lab 3 with each affected Orion assembly listed by serial number, status, and reviewer initials. The board was ugly, laminated in a hurry, with crooked tape at the corners. Jalen liked it better than the old executive displays. Ugly things could be honest if they told you where not to step. Dr. Shu called the first repair session at 8:30, not in the executive conference room, but on the production floor near the bench rig. She stood with a marker in one hand and 3 hours of sleep in her face. Priya had been assigned documentation lead for the technical audit. Alan sat 2 seats from the door, no longer hiding behind columns, though he still looked as if he expected every question to become a verdict. Jalen attended as an engineering intern, not as a demo participant. That distinction appeared on the agenda in plain text because he had asked for it. Everett was there too, sleeves rolled, no cameras, no board members. He had canceled the investor lunch and replaced it with a closed technical review whose notes would go to the board safety committee and the outside reviewer. Jalen did not know whether that made Everett noble or practical. Maybe both, maybe neither. Motives mattered less than records right now. The first decision came from the outside reviewer, Dr. Maribel Santos, a biomedical safety consultant with gray curls, red reading glasses, and no patience for Northlake's internal vocabulary. You call these experience-ready units? She asked, tapping a column in the old demo schedule. Meredith's replacement, a quieter operations manager named Jonah Reed, answered carefully. That was executive experience language. It meant visually staged. It meant unclear, Doctor. Santos said. Unclear language is where pressure hides. Jalen wrote that down before he could stop himself. The second decision changed the consent system. No participant form could be altered, reprinted, reformatted, or replaced after signature. Corrections required an addendum signed by the participant, engineering lead, and compliance. Any promotional use had to be separate from technical testing. Refusal could not affect internship status, contract standing, employment review, or product access. The words were dry. They did what good guardrails did, made the wrong thing harder to do quickly. The third decision changed red tags. A red tag became a lock, not a suggestion. Only engineering safety could clear it. Executive staff could not remove, rewrite, cover, or reclassify it. Any override of a test platform under active tag would alert the lead engineer, compliance, security, and an outside audit mailbox for the next 6 months when Dr. Shu read that part aloud. Priya's mouth twitched. That mailbox is going to be busy. For a while, Dr. Shu said. Then people will stop doing foolish things near it. A few technicians laughed, not because the damage was funny, but because the room needed somewhere to put air. Mason's findings arrived before lunch. The preliminary review did not fire him in a clean, dramatic line. It placed him on unpaid suspension pending termination proceedings based on the platform wake sequence, the supervisor override, tied to his credential, Allen's statement, and the altered workflow request. He had the right to respond. He had the right to counsel. He did not have the right to touch Orion Systems, supervise demo staff, or contact technicians involved in the review. Meredith's findings were narrower but still severe. The access logs showed her escort badge, opened Lab 3. The archive showed the replacement consent form, uploaded through an executive prep credential from her team. Her texts with Mason did not say forge the form. They said, make the packet match the visit and do not mention the intern's edits unless Lena asks. Counsel called it interference with safety documentation and participant consent. HR recommended termination of her role after the response period and immediate removal from all facility access. Jalen listened without satisfaction. He had expected pleasure, maybe, when the people who had cornered him finally met consequences. Instead, he felt the shape of all the almosts. Almost strapped into the device, almost recorded, almost blamed for stopping progress, almost turned into a difficult intern with a comfort issue. During the afternoon break, he found Allen by the vending machines, staring at a bag of pretzels like it had asked him a moral question. "You going to buy them?" Jalen asked. Allen blinked. Probably not. Then let the machine live. Allen gave a breath that nearly became a laugh. Fair. They stood there awkwardly while the compressor inside the machine rattled. "I gave my full statement," Allen said, "including the part where I repeated Mason's words and didn't challenge them." Jalen nodded. "Good. I'm not asking you to make me feel better. That's also good." Allen looked down at his ring. "They're keeping me off platform work for now. Training, review, maybe probation if I'm not dismissed." Jalen studied him. "You knew the drift mattered. I did, and you let him call it my comfort level." Allen's face tightened. "I did. There was no answer that repaired that, so Jalen did not offer one. He bought the pretzels himself, opened the bag, and held it out. Allen took one after a long second. It was not forgiveness. It was salt, awkwardness, and 5 minutes without a performance. At 4:40, Everett called Jalen into a small meeting with Dr. Shu, counsel, and HR. No one sat at the head of the table, Jalen noticed. He also noticed that power did not disappear because chairs moved. HR confirmed his internship would continue with full credit, no penalty for declining user testing, and authorship acknowledgement on the Orion drift correction. Dr. Shu added that his report had prevented a live unsafe demonstration. Everett approved a paid extension through the end of the semester, plus an offer to rotate into the safety validation team if Jalen wanted it. Jalen looked at the paper, then at Everett. "I need time before I answer." Everett nodded. "Of course. And I want that offer separated from any release publicity agreement statement about what happened." Counsel said, "It is." "I want that in writing too." Counsel wrote it down. Dr. Shu's eyes held a little tired pride. "You're becoming difficult in the most useful way." Jalen almost smiled. "I had examples. When he left, the red tag board was still crooked outside Lab 3. Someone had added a fourth piece of tape to hold the bottom edge flat. Under Orion Unit 7A, Priya had written in black marker, "Bench test only, no human load." For the first time since Thursday, Jalen looked at those words and believed the company might obey them. The first public rumor reached Jalen before the official memo did. It came through a campus group chat at 9:12 Tuesday morning, attached to a cropped photo from the atrium. Someone had taken it from a distance, maybe an employee, maybe a visitor near the glass doors. Jalen stood beside Everett Vale with his folder tucked under one arm, his prosthetic visible beneath his trousers, the blacked-out media wall behind him like a missing tooth. The caption said, "Intern exposes $1 billion prosthetic cover-up." By 9:20, another account had added 3 siren emojis and the words "disabled whistleblower." By 9:37, Jalen's mother had texted him one line, "Call me before I start calling people." He sat out Lab 3 with his phone in his hand and felt the old store manager heat return, but this time it came with something colder. The company had tried to turn him into a photograph. Now the internet wanted to do it faster and louder, Doctor. Hashu found him on the bench near the red tag board. You saw it. Hard to miss. We can ask communications to correct inaccuracies. Jalen looked at her. Communications was part of the problem. Jonah's team is separate. That doesn't make them safe. She accepted that, which he appreciated more than comfort. What do you want? He almost said he wanted everyone to leave him alone. It would have been true and useless. The story was already moving without him, picking up labels as it rolled. I want Northlake's statement to be about the process, he said. No hero intern, no inspirational language, no picture of me, no details about my medical history. They can say a participant consent form was replaced after signature, an equipment tag was altered, and a safety review is underway, Doctor. Hashu nodded. I'll take that to Everett, and my name stays out unless I approve it. I agree. The correction did not come smoothly. Nothing that required institutions to give up a flattering story ever did. Communications drafted 3 versions before Jalen would even read the 4th. The first thanked an alert young intern. The second praised Northlake's culture of listening. The third said a team member raised a concern during a scheduled review, as if he had been politely invited to place a suggestion in a box. He marked the 4th with a pen. No, he said, sliding it back across the small conference table. This still says existing safeguards worked. Jonah Reed rubbed a hand over his jaw. Legal is comfortable with that phrase. I'm not. Counsel looked up. The company did observe the records. After a device twitched, after my consent was found altered, after Priya took a screenshot, after Vince printed the badge report, after Alan finally spoke. Jalen heard the edge in his voice and did not sand it down. That's not safeguards working. That's people pushing past safeguards that had already failed. Everett sat at the far side of the table, quiet until then. Change it. Jonah nodded and typed. The final statement went out at 2:05 p.m. It did not name Jalen. It did not show his photograph. It acknowledged that employee and participant safeguards had failed during executive preparation for an Orion demonstration. It confirmed an outside safety and consent review, a pause on live user demonstrations, anti-retaliation protections for staff witnesses, and a new separation between executive communications and technical records. It was not beautiful. That was why Jalen believed parts of it. Repair inside the building moved slower. Priya received formal protection as a cooperating witness and a temporary raise for audit duties, which embarrassed her so much she dropped a torque wrench into a foam tray. Alan was reassigned to documentation training and removed from live platform operations pending review. He took it without protest. Once, when a younger technician asked whether that was fair, Alan said, "Fair would have been speaking sooner," and kept labeling files. Meredith's termination became final after her response period. Mason's did too, after the platform logs and document history confirmed the override and altered packet chain. Neither result brought celebration. Dr. Shu read the notice, closed her laptop, and went back to checking serial numbers. 2 weeks later, the first repaired Orion demo happened with no cameras, no investors, and no wearable user. The knee was mounted to a weighted bench leg, its motion tracked by sensors Jalen had helped recalibrate. When the platform started, nobody spoke. The joint flexed, loaded, corrected, and returned to neutral without the inward pull. Priya whispered, "That's what boring looks like." Jalen watched the graph flatten into acceptable range. Boring is underrated. Across the room, Everett smiled a little, but he did not interrupt. He had learned, at least for now, not to step into every important frame. At the end of the day, Jalen took the printed test sheet and added it to his folder. The folder was thicker now: original consent, corrected consent policy, red tag procedure, authorship notice, bench test data. Not a trophy. A trail. As he passed the atrium, the media wall was on again. This time it showed no faces, no slow-motion triumph, no perfect bodies moving through perfect light. Just a plain status board of Orion units, test phases, and clearance dates. Ugly, useful, honest. Jalen stopped long enough to read Unit 7A move from hold to bench cleared. Then he texted his mother before she could threaten the whole company again. Still here, still mine. 6 weeks later, Northlake's Board Safety Committee issued its final summary without music, portraits, or language polished enough to hide behind. Mason Pike's termination was upheld after the review confirmed he had used his supervisor credential to override the platform preload check, directed staff to treat Jalen's drift correction as a comfort concern, and participated in replacing the demo packet with a consent form Jalen had never signed. Meredith Crow's termination was upheld for interfering with safety documentation, using her escort access to enter Lab 3 during executive preparation, and coordinating a communications packet that concealed the red tag and altered participant permission. Allen received a final written warning, mandatory retraining, and a 1-year restriction from live user platform operations. Not because silence equaled forgery, but because silence had helped forgery breathe. The Orion line did not collapse. That mattered to Jalen more than he expected. The product was bigger than Mason's ambition or Meredith's staging. It belonged to the people who would one day cross wet sidewalks, grocery aisles, and bus steps with less calculation in their bodies. But Orion moved forward differently now. Every red tag locked the platform. Every consent form generated a participant copy at signing. Every demo script had to separate technical testing from promotional filming in language a tired person could understand before coffee. Dr. Shu kept a laminated copy of the new consent rule above the compliance station. Priya called it the wall of boring miracles. Jalen finished his internship on a Friday, with rain ticking against the high windows, the same kind of weather that had followed him into the lobby that first morning. The old atrium video was gone. In its place, the media wall showed test status, safety holds, and clearance dates. Visitors complained that it looked too plain. Employees learned to like plain. At 10, Dr. Shu gathered the team beside the bench rig. No press, no board, no staged innovation wall. She handed Jalen a folder, heavier than the one he had carried on inspection day. Final authorship confirmation, she said. Orion Unit 7A drift correction, consent system revision notes, and bench validation report. Your name stays on all three. Jalen opened it slowly. His name was printed beside Dr. Shu's, Priya's, and 2 other engineers. Not as participant, not as subject. Engineering intern. His throat worked before his voice did. Thank you. Priya nudged him with her elbow. Don't get sentimental. You still owe me the clean sensor file. You said the file was beautiful. I said the curve was beautiful. Your labels are a crime. The laugh that moved through the group was small and ordinary, which made it worth more. Everett Vale arrived after the meeting ended, carrying no coffee this time. He waited until Jalen stepped away from the others. I won't make a speech, Everett said. That would be new for CEOs. Everett accepted the hit with a faint smile. Fair. The safety validation rotation is still available after graduation, separate from any statement, release, or publicity. Written terms are with Dr. Shu. Jalen had read them twice the night before at his mother's kitchen table. She had circled the salary with a red pen, then circled the clause protecting refusal of user testing with the same pen. Practical love, in ink. I'm going to accept, Jalen said. After I finish the semester. Everett nodded. Good. And I want the first project to be the participant copy system. Not the glamorous part, the useful part. Jalen looked toward the compliance station, the part that proves what yes meant. Everett did not add anything to that. He was learning. That evening, Jalen's mother picked him up at the south entrance because she had insisted, and because he had stopped pretending insistence was not one of her love languages. She wore her navy scrubs under a denim jacket and examined his face before she examined the building. You leaving with all your papers? She asked. He lifted the folder. All of them. And your leg? Still attached. Don't get smart. He grinned despite himself, then let her hug him in the parking lot where anyone could see. For once, being seen did not feel like being used. Before he got into the car, his phone buzzed with an email from Dr. Santos, the outside reviewer. The subject line read, Community Clinic Pilot, Consent Concern. A neighborhood mobility clinic using older Northlake devices had reported that patients were being asked to sign bundled repair and media releases on the same tablet screen. Different place, different people, Same dangerous blur around permission. Jalen stared at the message until his mother leaned across the console. Problem? Maybe, he said. Not today's. She studied him, then the folder, then the building behind him. You eating first? He looked once more at Northlake's glass doors. Inside, the atrium wall glowed with a plain list of units cleared, held, and waiting. No faces. No slogans, just work that had to be done in the open. Yeah, he said, sliding the folder onto his lap as he got in. First we eat.